Hello everyone. Yeah, this is Science Professor Bene, and today we are looking at living environment topic, a very important topic, how molecules they move across the cell membrane. So we are looking at the New York State Standard, which says each cell is covered by a membrane that performs a number of important functions for the cell. These include separation from its outside environment, controlling which molecule enter and leave the cell, and recognition of chemical signals. So all these are functions of the cell membrane. We will also be paying attention to the process of diffusion and active transport, which are important in the movement of materials in and out of the cell. So let's look at this standard. So here we are looking at the cell membrane. The function of the cell membrane, there are three main functions of the cell membrane. And the first one is separating the content of the cell from the outside environment. The second one is controlling transport of material, including waste products, into and out of the cell. The cell membrane controls what enters and what leaves the cell. And the final function of the cell membrane is for recognition and responding to chemical signals. Okay? So let's start with concentration. Concentration is simply the number of molecules or the number or the amount of molecules in an area. So in this diagram, we see an area labeled A and B. As you can see, A has the highest concentration. And the reason why A has the highest concentration is because A has the greatest number of molecules in that area compared to B. So that's the reason why A has the highest concentration of molecules, because we have greater number of molecules at A than at B. Moving on, in which direction will the net flow of molecules be and by what process? So if you look at the molecules, we have higher concentration of molecules at A compared to B. That means we have higher number of molecules at location A compared to area B. So where would molecules move? That's a question. And based on the concentrations, we can say that the net flow of molecules will be from region A, which is at a higher concentration, to region B, which is a lower concentration. And the process is diffusion. Molecules move from high concentration to low concentration through the process of diffusion. So diffusion is a movement of molecules from areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. So let's look at how molecules move across the cell membrane. So we have molecules, they can move through two main ways, diffusion and active transport. So molecules can enter or leave the cell membrane through diffusion or active transport. The diagram on the left, it shows diffusion, the process of diffusion. Diffusion simply means the movement of molecules from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. And in diffusion, there is no use of energy. But if you look at the molecules on the right, we are looking at the molecules, they are moving from lower concentration to higher concentration. And when we are going against the concentration gradient, you need energy. And that's active transport. So the movement of molecules from an area of higher concentration to an areas of lower concentration is called diffusion. And active transport is the opposite. Active transport, the movement of molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of higher concentration through the cell membrane using energy. So the difference is in active transport, the cell uses energy. In diffusion, the cell does not require any energy. And in diffusion, the molecules are moving from areas of lower concentration to areas of higher concentration. Areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration for diffusion. You are moving molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration. And in diffusion, you don't need energy. In active transport, you are moving molecules from lower concentration to higher concentration. And with active transport, you need energy. When someone is active, that means the person is using a lot of energy. or the person possesses a lot of energy. But when someone is being passive, that means the person is not using energy. So diffusion is an example of passive transport. It doesn't require any energy. You are moving molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration. That does not require energy. But when you are moving molecules from areas of lower concentration, you are moving the molecules against the concentration gradient, and that requires energy, and that's active transport. So now let's do this checking for understanding. We are looking at the movement of molecules across the cell membrane. So the question says, a cell containing 96% water in its cytoplasm is placed in a 4% salt solution. So before we even look at the question, we need to understand what this question is about. So it says the cell contains 90% water in its cytoplasm. So let's look at the cell alone. If a cell contains 90% water in its cytoplasm, this means that the 4% is the salt. So that means that the cell has 4% solute or salt concentration. All right? And now let's look at the solution. It says it's placed in 4% salt solution. So if the solution has 4% salt, this means the solution will also have a solvent or water concentration of 96. So in this case, in this situation, that means that you have 90% water in the cytoplasm of the cell. You also have 96% water for the solution. So that means the solution is isotonic. The solution is isotonic. So this means the cell will neither lose water nor gain water, because the concentration of water molecules in the cell is the same as the concentration of water molecules outside the cell or in the solution. It also means that the concentration of salt in the cell is the same as the concentration of salt in the solution. So in this situation, the cell will neither lose water nor gain water. And this is the reason. This is because a cell containing 96% water in its cytoplasm has 4% salt in its cytoplasm, which is the same as the 4% salt solution the cell was placed in. So that means water enters the cell and water leaves the cell at the same rate. It doesn't mean that water will not move. The water will enter the cell, but it will also leave the cell at the same rate. Okay, so now let's look at this example. It says fresh water and salt water concentration. When we talk about fresh water has no or very low salt concentration. So that means the salinity is 0 or very, very low. So the concentration of salt or salinity is nearly 0. Examples of fresh water, they include pond, river, and stream. So salt water contains very high salt concentration. For example, seawater is a salt water. It contains very, very high salt concentration. On the other hand, fresh water, they contain very, very low salt concentration. And that means the amount of dissolved salt is very, very low. So let's look at this. It says the relative concentration of water in the pond in which a single-celled amoeba lives is greater than the concentration of water in its cytoplasm. What does it mean? It simply means that the concentration of water in the pond is greater than the concentration of water in the cytoplasm. So that means that we have more water molecules. We have more water molecules in the pond compared to the concentration of water molecules inside the amoeba cell. This simply means that inside the amoeba cell, the salt concentration is very high inside the amoeba cell compared to the dissolved salt in the pond water. Remember, fresh water, they have low to no salt concentration. So that means that the concentration of salt molecules in the amoeba cell is higher or greater than the concentration of salt molecules inside the pond of fresh water. So if the concentration of salt is higher in the amoeba cell, that means the concentration of solvent or water molecule inside the amoeba cell is lower. So in this case, water will move constantly from the freshwater pond into the amoeba by the process of diffusion. The reason why water will enter the amoeba cell is simply because there is higher concentration of water molecules in the pond, which is a fresh water, into the lower concentrated water molecule inside the amoeba cell. So that's the reason why water will constantly move into the amoeba cell, because the concentration of water molecules in the pond is higher than the concentration of water molecules inside the amoeba. Amoeba cell, they have higher concentration of salts or dissolved solutes than inside the fresh water. So in this case, the amoeba will gain water. The amoeba will constantly gain water. And if the amoeba doesn't do anything about the water which is constantly entering the cell, the amoeba cell will swell, and because it's an animal cell, it doesn't have cell wall. The amoeba cell will eventually burst. The cell will break, and the amoeba cell will die. So, therefore, the amoeba cell have to actively remove water from the cell using the contractile vacuum by the process called active transport. So that means the amoeba needs to use energy, spend energy to move water, collect the water in the contractile vacuum. And what will happen is the amoeba will move the contractile vacuum towards the cytoplasm, towards the end of the cell membrane. Then the contractile vacuum will break to let the water out of the amoeba cell. And when the amoeba, before the amoeba, will be able to achieve this, the amoeba cell has to use energy. The amoeba cell has to use energy to move the water out of it, to constantly move the water out of its cell to maintain constant internal environment. All right, so the water will enter the amoeba cell through the process of diffusion, because the water is moving from higher concentrated water molecules in the pond to a lower concentrated water molecules inside the amoeba cell, because the pond water is a fresh water. It has 0 to no salt water, salt concentration. So that means the concentration of water inside the pond is higher than the concentration of water inside the amoeba cell. So this means the amoeba will gain water, and the water will enter the amoeba cell through the process of diffusion. And the amoeba will expel the water through the process of active transport, because it's moving the water from lower concentration to higher concentration using energy. All right, so if the amoeba cell doesn't regulate the amount of water constantly entering the cell, it will swell and constantly burst, and the amoeba cell will die. So to solve this, the long-term solution for the amoeba to maintain a stable internal environment is for the amoeba to remove the excess water that will be collected in the contractile vacuum, which swells and finally expels water through an opening in the cell membrane. So the amoeba actively expels water out of the cell membrane through the process of active transport. So the amoeba has to actively expel water from its cell, and the process is active transport, because the amoeba is moving the water from regions of lower concentration to areas of higher concentration using energy, and that's active transport. The water will diffuse into the amoeba cell because the pond environment has higher concentration of water molecules than inside the amoeba cell. So water will enter the amoeba cell, and the process is diffusion. And the amoeba needs to remove the water from the cell through the process called active transport. So this is how the amoeba maintains balance.